This idea started for me when I thought about how souls in some ink monsters allowed them to persist after death, and how the ink machine would go about accomplishing such a task. I mean, we still don't know. Out of the thousands of souls that I've taken, I haven't been able to infuse them into many objects. So how could this machine do it consistently? The solution seemed to come to me thanks to Five Nights at Freddy's. Agony. For you Bendy fans, if you don't know, possession in the FNAF universe is actually through the emotion of agony rather than an actual soul, since agony is the most powerful emotion and reaches further from the body than any other emotion, even anger or sadness. So when a character in the FNAF universe suffers an agonizing death, that pain and suffering is able to allow them to potentially possess an object, an animatronic, or otherwise, even sometimes a person, as we see in one case. Yeah, there's a person who was possessed in the FNAF series. So if this ink machine is able to infuse these characters with souls, maybe instead the machine is killing these sacrifices and using their agony to grab hold of the character that the machine creates. It explains why a few characters who have a soul are mostly evil. I mean, they've suffered tremendous pain. And while evil Alice says that she went through the machine multiple times, she could be lying. She's evil. Or the agony attached onto that specific section of ink, thus letting it go through the machine again and again, instead of the whole "a drop of water in the ocean is rarely seen again" mentality that we see come from good Alice. But that's not really enough evidence to definitively say that Bendy and FNAF are the same universe, right? I mean, it's not even evidence, it's just potential. Is there anything else that gives us an explanation in another game, or vice versa? Actually, it could explain how William Afton plans to escape the virtual world in Security Breach. Now, we know that William is trying to escape the FNAF VR game we test, known as Freddy Fazbear's Virtual Experience, and this is because while he may be able to control certain individuals, like Vanny, for instance, he cannot control them completely, as we see in the FNAF AR emails, so he wants to get out and get back to his world. How could he do this? Well, how about with equipment similar to the ink machine? While yes, it wouldn't really be the ink machine itself, a machine that is capable of infusing something with a soul or agony like we see the ink machine do, could very well be what allows William to move from the virtual world back into a robotic endoskeleton, or something similar like we see in the last seconds of the Security Breach trailer. Since converting sentient computer code into a living AI in a sense is certainly easier said than done. I mean, this isn't Doki Doki Literature Club, right? So what machine could this be? It's honestly hard to tell. It could be anything. However, it could be made using similar or scrapped parts from the ink machine, or gone through whatever process caused the ink machine to get haunted or whatever it had to go through to gain its powers in the Bendy games. And they could be from the same manufacturer, or they could just honestly, it could just be the ink machine itself. Now, do I think it's going to be the ink machine? Absolutely not. It would just be another machine that we have that would link to the ink machine in some way, but I don't think it's entirely out of the question. I mean, it's definitely not going to be intentional, but hey, it's fun anyway. Bendy and the Ink Machine started in 2017, which is 3 whole years after FNAF released its first game, and is the year after Sister Location came out. Plus, later that year we got Pizzeria Simulator, which could have some subtle references to Bendy and the Ink Machine that we just aren't aware of. So while it's still unlikely that we end up getting a solid, confirmed canon link between these games, it's still fun to speculate and provide answers for questions using the laws of another universe. But I guess at this point, it's not another universe at all, right? There we have it, friends. Are Bendy and FNAF in the same universe? Probably not, but there are some aspects from each game that can be explained using the laws of another universe, so maybe it's not another universe after all. In a 10, Twisted Alice. Twisted Alice is the monster form of Susie Campbell, one of the Alice Angel caricatures in the cycle, and the secondary antagonist of the Bendy series, appearing as the main antagonist of Chapter 3 and 4 of the first game, as well as another level antagonist in Boris in the Dark Survival. She also returns in Bendy in the Dark Revival. Twisted Alice appears to be a young and kind of a humanoid replica of Alice Angel with straight and medium black hair, thin eyebrows, and black lipstick. She wears a semi-broken halo that is melted onto the left side of her head, and also has short horns, because apparently that's also what angels have. The left side of her face also is melted, like her halo, except this time it looks like melted wax, with half of her teeth being exposed, and then an empty left eye socket with a few ink-like tears, although I think we can all tell that it's not ink. On her neck there also appears to be a slit oozing what again looks like ink, but let's be honest, it's not. And I mean, like, this is just a fairly easy pick for what would be in the back rooms, okay? Like, dude, this is just a monster. This is what she actually is. And so, yeah. And since that's kind of the whole point, her being an ink monster that would be discarded, that's why she's here. But since, again, that's her whole theme, that's why she's at 10, alright? But it's still a pretty solid choice. It's a pretty solid start. In at 9, Sammy Lawrence. Sammy Lawrence was an award-winning musician and composer and the director of the music department at Joey Drew Studios, known for writing the music for Bendy cartoons in the studio's heyday. Around 1946, as revealed by Dreams Come to Life, the novel, he stole a large number of ink bottles that were used for the ink machine. He then proceeded to drink them day by day as some kind of like weird Crowley human blood addiction, and then ultimately transformed into a mind-corrupted creature of ink. He later appears in Bendy and the Ink Machine as one of the major antagonists pursuing Henry during the game, and is just an all-around weird dude, okay? Like, the ink form of Sammy is like the result of ink corruption mixed with insanity after he became addicted to drinking ink machine ink, but he also never went through the actual ink machine. So thanks to this, he became insane and just put on a Bendy mask, then tried to become Bendy, and then also started sacrificing other former employees, okay? This literally sounds like an origin story that will get sued, because it's like scary familiar to me. I don't know why, okay? Or maybe that's just the voices in my head. But no matter what, this dude would be in the back rooms. You can't tell me. He's drinking ink! Come on! In at 8, Searchers. The Searchers are the Cycle's ink-comprised creatures and basically the primary grunt enemies that appear in the Bendy series. They're the ink blobs that pop up from the ground whenever you need a slew of enemies to fight off. And aside from the main version, there are actually several types of unique Searchers. There's minor Searchers, the swollen Searchers, which themselves have a variant. There's the mini-bosses, there's a boss type, and then there's the variant with Sammy's mask. The Searchers are essentially human-based creatures entirely made out of ink that have no souls, and are roughly 2/3 as tall as Henry, or at least that's how I felt how tall they were in the games. They have very flexible bodies, elongated arms, the lower part of their bodies also seems to like melt into puddles of ink, and then they're also like stuck within them. They have to crawl to move, and they leave the ink trails behind. Then they have like the most horrific mouths I think I've ever seen on a creature that is just pure ink, okay? They have like a ghoulish human face that has like a giant like SCP-193 mouth, okay? I don't get it. There's like 2 indentations where there should be eyes. They have like movable eyebrows. They seem to be human, but their legs are stuck in the ink, which isn't really helping their attitude. But yeah, they would also show up in the backrooms. This is like Backrooms 101 in terms of monster. Yeah. In at 7, Soup Can Retcon. Believe it or not, like Ripley's, there's actually a retcon in Bendy and the Dark Survival. In a cabinet under the table of confiscated weapons, which I believe you can see in either chapter 3 or 4, is a bacon soup minigun, which you can't actually use, unfortunately, because that would be awesome. But the bacon soup minigun itself is a reference to a hack or a glitch where you could infinitely throw the empty bacon soup can in Bendy and the Ink Machine Chapter 4, Colossal Wonders. So basically, it explains that hack or glitch as an actual hidden canon feature within the game, which is like the weirdest thing to retcon, but also like goddamn, that's interesting. I like that. I wish I could use it though. And at 6, Roll Ink Loud. The Ink Jets are a band of lost ones who can sometimes be found rocking out in artist rests. To unlock this event though, the player must have 2 halves of a ticket. So, you know, making 1 full ticket. The first part will be on a table in a room where Twisted Alice has Audrey solve a puzzle, and the second one can be found in the Ghent building, in the room with the rounding silos. The player must then go to the 2nd floor room and they'll find Keeper Log 26, and it will be tucked in the back of a storage cabinet to the right of that desk. After this, you're able to see the Ink Jets jamming out, which I think is just, it's funny as hell, okay? I love that for some reason in this world that Joey created, there's a random, like, actual ink boy band in the middle of artist rests. And for some reason, they'll put on shows. And like, only if you have the ticket. Like anyone else that can be there while they perform, but you specifically, you need a ticket. Because you're a Drew, or at least supposed to be. More on that later. Halfway through into number 5, time to reflect. If you're like me, you're not really used to mirrors working in video games. Most of the time, they're just like a blank texture that doesn't really do anything, or maybe the mirror is really dusty and you can't actually see anything. Or maybe sometimes they're just reflections of the room, but they won't have the player in them. Only in like simpler games like Gary's Mod, which was in essence just a base that people added onto since it started off as a mod. Only in those were there actually a reflection, but because the animations were so simple, it made sense and it was actually relatively possible. So when I saw the mirror in Audrey's office right off the bat, I was impressed. But luckily, my experience with Gary's Mod saved me from being more curious, since if I was to interact with the mirror 5 times, the ghostly face of Audrey would briefly flash on the mirror with a loud shriek. That same scream is actually the audio used for Alpha Bendy and Bendy and the Ink Machine's prototype, which would have made me very upset, because as I've expressed multiple times on this channel, I hate jump scares, okay? Gotta love that sensory overload, baby. But either way, this is a requirement for the time to reflect achievement. I say a requirement, but it's the only requirement. But it begs the question, how is this even possible? Unless she's just like hallucinating it. In it 4, Majora's Mask. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is commonly known as one of the scariest Zelda games. The looming threat, a time limit, and having to repeat your 3 days over and over until you save everyone is definitely terrifying. But now that I think about it, it's kinda similar to the cycle. The cycle is created so that Henry can go through the first game over and over again, being tortured as a totally healthy and not at all a serial killer origin story in any way by Joey, because that's not a red flag. But once Henry does it, or tries to do it, and fails, he restarts, which must be why the Majora's Mask moon actually makes an appearance in Bendy and the Dark Revival. Yeah, you're goddamn right it does. You smash 10 jars in the city area, and then you look up, the moon will grow to an enormous size and have an angry face on it, which disappears once you look away. This Easter egg is obviously a reference to Majora's Mask. I mean, obviously, I don't really know why I felt the need to say it again, but just in case you didn't know. And I don't think that it will kill you, but if it did, that would be funnier. If you look away and then you look back, however, it will be gone, so it doesn't last forever. Getting close to the end into number 3, Henry. Henry Stein is a former animator and the co-founder of Joey Drew Studios, working with his partner Joey Drew. He's responsible for the creation of various cartoon characters, including Bendy, Boris, and Alice Angel, and given his appearance in Bendy and the Dark Revival, I feel like him showing up in the backrooms isn't too out of the question. Especially since, in my head at least, the cycle is like the backrooms equivalent for the Bendy series. So Henry being there in Dark Revival kind of solidifies that idea in my brain. Now I'm not quite sure how accurate that is, since I haven't gotten that far into the game yet, but I feel like this is a pretty accurate analogy, but I'm sure you'll correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. And you know what? If I'm wrong, the backrooms always needs a protagonist, right? Yeah, damn right, so shove it, haters. He's on this list, deal with it. But ultimately, into number 2, Ink Demon. Ink Bendy, also known as the Ink Demon, is the main antagonist of the Bendy franchise. He is a failed attempt at creating the Joey Drew Studios' popular mascot Bendy in real life using the ink machine, and is just all around a defect among several other cartoon physical incarnations, because this one is lacking a soul. Ink Bendy is a tall, malformed figure with skin made of black ink. Skin. He resembles Tar. Think the Tar Pit monster from Scooby-Doo, and that's this guy. His head highly resembles that of the original Bendy, but possessed, and like basically my sleep paralysis demon. His horns are curved, and you know, they're like demon horns, and he's able to use them to kind of like simulate animal ears, but also, like, come on guys, okay? You can't look at a literal ink demon and tell me that it wouldn't appear in the backrooms. A place where the creature typically illustrated as the one using it as its hunting ground, okay? That entity thing could also be seen as a creature made of ink, okay? Actually, how do you look at Bendy and just say that he wouldn't? Go ahead, tell this terrifying creature to his face that he can't be in the backrooms because he isn't scary enough, or whatever angry comment you've already left on this video, okay? Go ahead. He's already like the color of the wallpaper when you don't have the ink, okay? So we might as well let him chill there. And finally, into number 1, Beast Bendy. Oh, there you go. You did it. You told him it and you made him mad. There you go. Beast Bendy is an alternate monstrous form of Ink Bendy and the final boss of Bendy and the Ink Machine. He later comes back in Bendy and the Dark Revival. This powerful form of Ink Bendy is far more intimidating, larger, and is almost entirely ink, and just Jesus Christ. Compared to his original form, the shape of this monstrosity is almost symmetrical in a sense. While still having absent eyes, his enlarged head is like very cartoonish. He has a wide mouth, he has rows of sharp teeth, and it just, I don't know, he's like showing the gums, okay? He's really into it. Probably too into it. The bow tie and the left glove on his hand are also just gone now somehow, and just, he's overall more ferocious and animal-like in his behavior. It's terrifying, okay? He moves like on his knuckles and fights like a goddamn gorilla. And his legs are like shrinking. Like, I don't get it, okay? He's going to haunt my nightmares, but also the back rooms, and you can't say anything about it because I've already made the list, alright? He's the most video game equivalent version of a backrooms entity I have ever seen, okay? Aside from, like, glitches in general, okay? So yeah, definitely gonna top the list.
Starting us off in at number 10, Sammy's voice. While we never fully get to see Sammy Lawrence in the game, we do hear a whole lot of his voice. Makes sense, considering his main shtick was to write songs. He was the music department director at Joey Drew Studios. Various audio logs can be heard in the game with Sammy's voice in them too. But there's also an Easter egg in Chapter 3 that contains his voice that's especially creepy. If you go to the hallway close to level 11, where the music radio is, there are a bunch of instruments just lying around. If you interact with the instruments in a specific order, you'll hear an audio log play in which Sammy says, "We've all been waiting, but now he will set us free." Ugh. In order to hear it, you gotta hit the bass fiddle, then the drum, then the violin, then the piano, and lastly the drum again. Moving on to number 9, the Meatly. Throughout the game, there's a series of hidden rooms that you can find that contain this stick figure, the Meatly. Who's that? Well, the Meatly is actually the lead creator of Bendy and the Ink Machine, in real life. He's the founder of the game dev company Kindly Beast, and he's also a comic illustrator and puppeteer. His real name is unknown, he just goes by the Meatly, and he's known online for his stick figure caricature. Anywho, in Chapter 1, you'll see the Meatly stick figure at the end of this hallway with a blank stare on its face, and Henry will say, "What the hell is that?" It continues throughout the other chapters in the game too, always existing behind this same poster, but only accessible after you've done something specific to trigger it. While it may seem like a really cool Easter egg, when you do find the Meatly in the game initially, his presence can be quite haunting, at least for a moment. And at number 8, the Ink Machine. While the Ink Machine is most prominent in Chapter 1, it constantly reappears in the game as an Easter egg, appearing for a split second, being lowered on chains into darkness. Now in Chapter 2, you can see it behind the bars on the right from the hallway in between the ink pool and the ritual room. Then, in Chapter 3, you can see it behind the bars on the right from the trailer room. Then, in Chapter 4, the Ink Machine appears in the distance in the spiral stairway, but only after you've encountered the flashing hallucination of hands coming from the walls. And if you've never played this game, all of those things might sound crazy, but hey, it's definitely worth the play.
And it's 7, Butcher Gang. The Butcher Gang is a group of horribly disfigured creatures based on Joey Drew Studios cartoon characters, mainly the original Butcher Gang from the Bendy cartoons. I feel like that's pretty obvious. Their bodies show horrific mutations with random objects in place of missing body parts. Various other elements move to the wrong place. One has like a mouth on the top of their head. And it's basically to the point that they look unrecognizable to their original selves. Their demeanor resembles the original Butcher Gangs, but you know, they have slightly low intelligence. No, they're dumb, okay? They can't speak properly. They talk in extreme gibberish, more than me, and they can rarely speak clear words, although I relate to that one. But still, it's absolutely something that I would expect to be in the backrooms, especially given how disfigured they are. I mean, like, the backrooms is supposed to be a developer area with discarded and unused files and assets, right? So why wouldn't the horribly mutated and messed up Butcher Gang be here in this context, okay? Piper, Fisher, Stryker, they're basically the Hex Girls of the backrooms in my eyes. Like, they'd be singing while also slowly trying to kill me, and I mostly said Hex Girls because I don't want to summon a sentient code serial killer, which if I said the other thing, definitely would. And it's 6, Projectionist. The Projectionist is a cyborg-like ink creature that is just one of the many inhabitants of the cycle, and just an inky reincarnation of Joey Drew Studios' lead projectionist Norman Polk. He's like a 3rd level antagonist in Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 of Bendy and the Ink Machine, and a secondary antagonist in Boris and the Dark Survival. He also returns as a minor supporting character in Dark Revival, but the thing is, he's basically like just a tall humanoid creature that is mostly completely covered in ink, and most notably has a projector on his head, yeah. Several long black hanging wires, which are possibly meant to be film roll, are attached to like the back of his head and then like attached to his back through that. There's a long wire attaching to his right ankle. I don't know why his whole body needs to be hooked up to it, but you know, you do you, bro. I ain't judging. He has a film reel stuck on his left shoulder. His head is a freaking projector, and like, come on. Okay, look at the walking projector ink monster infused with a human soul and tell me that that's not gonna make sense to me in the back rooms. Exactly. These things were almost designed to fit in here, okay? Save for like the cartoon look, which for the purposes of this list and the entirety of this list really, we're dismissing that look since in the back rooms I feel like they'd be realistic. And also, you've made it halfway through if you're still here, alright? So if you're here, subscribe. You kind of obviously want to. I can tell. And at 4, Wilson. Wilson Ark is the main antagonist of Bendy and the Dark Revival. He's the son of Nathan Ark, the founder of Arkgate Films, or Archgate Films depending on how you want to say it, and an old friend of Joey Drew. Wilson is a very deceitful person, shown by his ability to manipulate Audrey into doing multiple things. He portrays himself as weak, fragile, and an old man, but he is very careful with the words that he chooses, making him exceptional at manipulation, kind of like my ex. And I mean the old man part. Behind this disguise of his though, he is a very narcissistic and self-centered person, referring to himself as the cycle's savior and basically demanding worship. But honestly, this man would be the one controlling the backrooms, okay? Think like the game master from Sword Art Online or the game masters from the Hunger Games that are like controlling the dome or whatever it is. That's basically who this guy would be for the backrooms. The guy controlling things that just wants to make your life a living hell for the fun of it. That's what he would do, and that's why he's here.
And at number 3, screams. There's an organ in the first room to the right in the entrance of the hallway. If you play the keys on the organ, there's a faint moaning scream that can be heard. If you do this 5 times, you'll actually get an achievement called Johnny's Broken Heart. Check it out. Finally, in our number 1 spot, Wandering Sin. Throughout the game, Bendy and his happy demeanor become more and more haunting. Often you'll notice that whenever you destroy the cardboard cutouts of Bendy and then turn back around, you'll see that the cardboard cutouts have been repaired. They're there in perfect condition. It's really eerie. But there's an Easter egg that takes that to the next step. If you ever glitch or teleport to a normally inaccessible area of the game, you'll see a very creepy looking version of Bendy, specifically the Bendy cardboard cutout. Except, it's got age stains on it. There's ink leaking from its eyes and mouth, along with a pentagram behind him, suggesting that the cutout is demonically possessed. He'll be holding a sign that reads, "Wandering is a terrible sin."
Would you want Bendy and FNAF to share a universe, or keep them separate? And is there any other connection I missed? Be sure you let me know down below. Speaking of comments, I'm going to respond to some from previous videos. Aaron McElgott says don't do the same thing or the police will get you. William did thousands of murders and he's fine. Don't use a fictional character killing people to justify potentially doing murders in the real. The FNAF police are stupid. They're being paid off, or they're just plain dumb. There is no way in hell the police ignored bleeding and dead body smelling animatronics. I mean, at least they wouldn't in our world, I hope. Plus, the technology we have and the skills that we have now are so much more sophisticated than in the 70s or the 80s or wherever these murders took place. Like at that point, parents let their kids do basically whatever they wanted. Like, yeah, come home when you see the stars or the sun in the morning. Like, make sure you at least use some cling wrap and tape when you're going over to your girlfriend's. Like, nowadays, you look at someone funny and they call the cops, so I doubt that William would have gotten away with it in this time period. Meaning that you won't either. So don't commit crimes. It's not like I've been doing it for years and no one's caught me yet or anything. Imagine I wasn't joking when I said that, and like years later it's revealed that I'm like a serial killer, and you realize that I was just admitting it all along. It's like the jokes that are like like people who provide recipes and blogs just like admit to murders on the regular, but no one reads the blurb before the actual recipe. I mean, in one universe I am a serial killer. It's not this one though. Bipullet the Fighter said, bruv, no. William Afton was upset by his son's death, and it was his motivation along with the death of his daughter to start working with Remnant. I'm sorry, but this can't be the case. We still don't know William's original motivation. His goals certainly changed once he saw that Elizabeth possessed Baby, but he was already killing when his kids started dying. In FNAF 4, we see an empty girl's bedroom, yet never Elizabeth. We also see that Crying Child has nightmares of stomach-mouthed animatronics, which would, as far as we know, only be caused by seeing Baby scoop Elizabeth with the claw, like we see in Sister Location, meaning that William had already built the baby animatronic and was killing, since Circus Baby's Pizza World was only started after Freddy's closed due to the missing children's incident, so he was killing people before his kids started dying. So, bruv, no, William was not upset by his son's death, unless it was another son that we've never seen who dies before FNAF 4 takes place in 1983. It's just not possible. Rafia Ali Khan said, Matt Pat should see this. I know, right? This was a comment on the FNAF 3 bad ending analyzed video, by the way, just for context. But like, I straight up tagged him in a community post talking about how we've made over 200 FNAF videos, and he hasn't even mentioned us. And we got nothing back. Like, I have some damn good theories and some damn good research and proof, but like, we need to like storm the castle of like the Game Theorist subreddit or something, because like I got some good stuff here, Matt Pat. You just haven't seen it. It's disappointing, really. Like in a previous video, I mentioned how I wondered how many videos I've actually done about FNAF, and it's like cause like some on the channel from other people, mostly Amanda, but I actually counted for this video, and I myself, going from memories and the FNAF playlist on the channel, which you should check out, links in the iCard, I have roughly made 158 FNAF videos, give or take a few due to memory. That's ridiculous. I have made over 150 FNAF videos for this channel alone, not to mention live streams or Twitch. Goddamn. Our channel subscribers have in essence like doubled since we started FNAF, and you people wonder why we keep uploading so much Five Nights at Freddy's content. It's because it gets the views, man. The views. N123P said orange. Orange, you glad I didn't say banana? Because the comment actually said banana. And I said orange. Swiss Boy said, I believe Golden both, but it's very, very stupid not to consider the fact of how light works in the FNAF 3 bad ending. Yeah, we need to take into consideration basic physics when coming up with those theories. Well, unless it's like specifically about the paranormal stuff, but like light isn't paranormal. And the whole crying child thing wasn't introduced. Yeah, that's a pretty big thing. Bradley Lindo said, if a spirit is keeping William Afton alive, then two spirits couldn't be in Golden Freddy, so it would be impossible. I think that Cassidy or whoever was killed while William was wearing Golden Freddy suit and stuffed in Spring Bonnie and stuff like that, and all the images of Golden Freddy and Ultimate Custom Night is a reminder of who killed him and the last thing he saw. This was actually kind of what I was saying, and we were wrong about Golden Freddy. If Cassidy is the one you should not have killed, she couldn't be Golden Freddy. Hence why I personally think that the spirit of Crying Child is the one you should not have killed, since it just makes more sense. And the whole Golden Freddy twitching thing could be a reminder or just another way of torturing William. It doesn't have to be the same person. In a 10 deja vu. Straight up, the first mission of Bendy and the Dark Revival had me remembering the first level of Bendy and the Ink Machine very well, because it was basically the same thing, just slightly shorter this time around, because the section where you could find the items was smaller than the original game. Yeah, I mean, it took me like 15 minutes to actually do it still because I'm incompetent, but like, come on. I make too many non-related jokes, and if I had actually focused, maybe I would have thought things through, but still, okay? This is freaking hilarious. You replay the first chapter of Bendy and the Ink Machine. The whole first chapter, the first goddamn mission, but this time with a creepy old guy watching you the whole time. And seriously, how is Wilson still employed there? Like, I get that like he's like the son, you know, and like nepotism and all that, but like seriously, I and basically everyone else who played the game that I watched had called out that Wilson was very much a walking HR violation. How has he not been fired?
Let's see what we can find. Come along now.
Let's. You're the maintenance guy. Dude, you have one eye. How are you supposed to protect me? But yeah, it's still the first mission, just slightly creepier. Like, even the same Bendy cutout is being placed where we just were. There's the same items on the pedestals. The same reason to have those items there, restarting the Ink Machine. But the weird thing is that the first version of this took place in a world that doesn't technically exist. So, do with that information what you will. In at 9, Sauron. He is always watching. Okay, well not actually like Sauron, but you know what I mean. The dark atmosphere of the game and the constant paranoia of jump scares, or maybe that's just me, can cause the players to shy away from actually like exploring different parts of the animation studio. Especially when you might think that this is just a linear game like the first time. But no. People can find clues about what's really going on within the animation studio from mysterious artifacts placed around the map. The memory items, the additional audio logs that aren't required for the story, etc. However, for this one, you're actually gonna have to take a step off the beaten path and kinda go where you wouldn't expect. Players can find eyes painted on a desk drawer in the first chapter of Bendy and the Dark Revival, alright? Like the actual cycle. These eyes have the message "he sees everything" written above them on a table in black ink, obviously, because it's Bendy. But then you can also collect an audio log from on top of that desk and discover even more secrets about what's going on. But honestly, this is terrifying. The idea that we're constantly being watched isn't actually all that far off either. Or at least it wasn't that far off because of the whole, spoiler alert for like the story of the game. But if you watch MatPat's theory, you already know about this. 3, 2, 1. But because of the whole world being made by Joey so that he could torture people, it was kinda, we were obviously being watched. It's kinda his world. That's how it goes. In at 8, out-of-map secrets. Yes, much like other popular games, Bendy and the Dark Revival has some out-of-map secrets as well. While games like Skyrim have just random unused tiles and whatnot, Bendy and the Dark Revival has 2 different characters that you can possibly find. One of them is a physical incarnation of the Wandering Sin. The Wandering Sin is a hidden Bendy cutout found throughout Bendy and the Ink Machine and Boris and the Dark Survival, and in this game, known as Sinful Bendy, it can only be found in inaccessible locations. You can also find the Borkis, a paranormal counterpart of Boris the Wolf and hidden enemy in Boris and the Dark Survival. You can also find him in Dark Revival, but unlike their original appearance, he's not a hostile foe, but rather an enigmatic secret that can only be found in other inaccessible areas. But, they're inaccessible areas, so it's not something that you can normally see, which is unfortunate because, like the Secret Bendy, I am also a physical incarnation of Wandering Sins. However, mine are mostly based on lusting after chicken animatronics.
And at number 7, the jump scares. This game has no shortage of jump scares. In chapter 1, Bendy has one particular jump scare that had players freaked out. After you start the task of collecting all the items, there's a door next to Wally Frank's office that you can interact with. Now if you attempt to open it, this will trigger the Bendy jump scare. Take a look, guys. Speaking of jump scares, and at number 6, Sammy's jump scare. Bendy isn't the only one delivering unexpected frights. In chapter 2, the old song, if you go to the first place where you encounter Sammy and stand next to the wall with the Bendy cutout that's right there, you can hear the sound of Sammy talking within the wall. He says, "In the morning, you may awake in the morning, you will be dead." Yeah, pretty creepy when you're just standing there and not expecting it. And at number 5, Sammy's shadow. We got some more creepy Sammy Lawrence for you in at this number. Now in chapter 2, after you've unlocked the entrance to the flooded sewers, don't enter them just yet. If you look behind the bars opposite to the entrance, you will see a terrifying sight. It's a shadow of Sammy Lawrence standing in behind the bars. Now after you retrieve the second valve and leave the sewers, Shadow will completely disappear altogether. And at number 4, the whistling. In chapter 2, in the part with the ink flooded room, right before Ink Bendy pops up, if you turn around and walk backwards towards the door down the hallway, you'll trigger this particular audio event. While standing next to the door, you'll hear the sound of the ink machine running. And if you wait for about 40 seconds and idle, you'll hear the same whistling that appeared in the chapter 2 and later the chapter 5 trailers for the game. Now remember, you'll need to walk backwards in order to prevent Ink Bendy from popping up. Otherwise, you're not gonna hear this.
Getting close to the end at number 3, Sock Puppet. Apparently there's a lot of hidden secrets in the first scene, or in like the first area, because you can see some freaky At the beginning of the game, if you press the button to call the elevator, you can then backtrack to Audrey's workroom. You can pick up a plush ball from under her desk in the same area that you initially collected her keys, and then you can pick up 2 more balls on your way back from 2 other office areas. One is on the floor near a wall, and the second is on a desk in the center. Return to the elevator hall and interact with Wilson's bucket and mop and throw those balls in, and a sock puppet will then jump out of the bucket, earning you the achievement, "Did you see that?" This makes absolutely no sense, because the scene is supposed to take place in the real world. However, I think the interesting part about this is that you're using balls to summon this thing, and there's a baseball used as a memory object later in the game. Now that is probably a coincidence, since this is an Easter egg, but maybe the sock puppet being linked to Wilson and the memory could be a bigger hint to another little secret. But ultimately, in at number 2, 4 is a crowd. Jane Todd was a former employee at Joey Drew Studios. Her corpse can actually be found in this game next to an audio log in chapter 2 of Dark Revival. Jane Todd's corpse looks defeated animated as it lies lifeless on the floor, her body being somewhat blue, which makes it stand out, but that could also just be like the whole shading with colors kind of thing, since you know the corpse is made of ink, so it's jet black. You can't really shade black with black, so it makes sense for them to use blue. But either way, we actually know that this is a corpse since it has persisted and didn't turn into a pure puddle of ink after death, which does mean that this is meant to be Jane Todd. Yeah, this is definitely a situation where she turned into an ink creature, but this really does make me think, is this her? Like, is this her, or is it just like an assistant? Because she could be the member of the Butcher Gang that she proposed. Jane Todd was working on animating a 4th character that could be a part of the Butcher Gang. She wanted to make her character, Carly, join the Butcher Gang along with Bendy, Alice, and Boris, but nobody believed that it would actually happen, and then she was dead. And finally, in at number 1, Audrey Ark. This isn't a confirmed secret, however MatPat seems to make a pretty good case for Audrey Drew actually being Audrey Arch. Well, kind of. You see, throughout the game you collect various memories which don't really have an explanation beyond what the item is. MatPat believes that these all belong to Nathan Arch, the founder of Archgate Films and an old friend of Joey Drew, and that after allowing Joey Drew Studios to go bankrupt so that he could acquire the Bendy IP at a steal, that Joey somehow got Tessa Arch, Nathan's wife, into the ink machine and turned her into Audrey, so that Joey could finally have a proper family of his own. Which would also then mean that we'd be playing as Wilson's mother. And that at the end of the game, Wilson has an Oedipus complex so massive that therapists could be studying it for a millennia, even if it is unknowingly so. But maybe that's why he was so drawn to Audrey, and uses her to turn the ink machine back on instead of literally anyone else could have been there at any other time. Or maybe it's wrong, because after all, that is just a theory. A game theory. Because it's a theory coming from game theory, so it's a game theory.